If you were to believe the mythology about the Buddha, he practiced for lifetimes before he had his opening. But in any event, he ultimately lighted on three characteristics that he spoke about for his 45 years of teaching. Three characteristics that are common to all of us as humans. Also, they're called the three marks of existence. And that he felt, and he repeatedly taught that, hey, coming to a visceral understanding of these characteristics is critical to our liberation. So, and the three characteristics that the Buddha lighted on and taught repeatedly over all those years, one was anicca, which is impermanence. Another is dukkha, which is suffering or unsatisfactoriness. And the third is anatta, which is the selfless nature of existence, of creation. So you could sum it up, if you wanted to, in the vernacular that, hey, life is hard. That's the dukkha, suffering part. It puts you through changes. That's the impermanence part. But don't take it so personal. That's the selfless part. So each of these pathways, and you kind of get into them, is a portal, so to speak, a portal to freedom, and they support the understanding of the others. So we'll start with just talking a little bit about impermanence. I mean, we all know that things are impermanent, mostly. It's a little poem from Zen Master Dogen. To what shall I liken the world? Moonlight, reflected in dewdrops, shaken from a crane's bill. To what shall I liken the world? Moonlight, reflected in dewdrops, shaken from a crane's bill. I mean, you really get the sense of the fleeting nature of it all. The temporary flash of moment after moment. Things moving, lightning speed changing. I mean, we don't have to take a deep look to notice that everything is changing. I mean, Antarctica used to be in the tropics and it drifted to the South Pole. In 2011, that big earthquake in Japan, that horrible disaster, it moved the whole island of Japan 17 inches in 1 minute. So things are moving. The Earth has never been in the same place more than once. You know, think about that. It spins on its axis about 1,000 miles an hour. It's spinning on an axis. The whole solar system, including the sun and the other planets, is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And there are at least 1 billion other solar systems like ours in the Milky Way galaxy that we can probably see from here at night. There's not that much light issue. That whole Milky Way galaxy is spinning together with 1 billion solar systems at 1,000,000 miles an hour, moving together. And as far as we know, there are millions of these galaxies, each with billions of solar systems, all moving. They're never in the same place. You know, they're being born, they're dying out, colliding, everything's in flux. And if we kind of put our Hubble telescope away and pick up our electron microscope, we take a look into the atomic world. If you blow up the nucleus of an atom to the size of a pea, the electron that circles around it would be a half mile away, the size of a dust mote. And then we look even further into subatomic particles. We find that they change form millions of times in a second. And on closer inspection, it's just energy, vibrating energy. Fields of energy we're just beginning to try to understand. So the Buddha, without the benefit of an electron microscope or a Hubble telescope, had very sensitive instrumentation. He used his 6 senses. And applying these 6 senses directly, that's all that he needed to generate all of his teachings, just as you've been doing this retreat. Observing and observing some more the arising and passing of phenomena. Breath, body sensations, emotions, thoughts, sounds, internal, external, the entire changing play of creation. So, knowing intellectually that things change, that's where we start. But unless you take on the training, really sitting quietly and watching over and over this bubbling, arising, and passing of phenomena, this creation, over and over until our actual cells start to know it and we viscerally get it. Only then is our life transformed. So the Buddha saw this. It's a repetition of practice. But it's exactly what you've been doing here. And so when your cells begin to accept that change, when you get it at a deeper level than intellectually, you relax more. That you're getting more with the flow of nature, not fighting it so much. The interior war starts to cool a little bit. So this from Pema Chodron. Impermanence is the goodness of reality. Impermanence is the goodness of reality. Just as the 4 seasons are in continual flux, winter changing to spring, to summer, to autumn, just as day becomes night, light becomes dark, becoming light again, and in the same way, everything is constantly evolving. Impermanence is the essence of everything. It is babies becoming children, then teenagers, then adults, then old people, and somewhere along the way dropping dead. Impermanence is meeting and parting. It is falling in love and falling out of love. Impermanence is bittersweet, like buying a new shirt and years later finding it as part of a patchwork quilt. People have no respect for impermanence. We take no delight in it. In fact, we despair of it. We regard it as pain and we resist it. Somehow in the process of trying to deny that things are always changing, we lose our sense of the sacredness of life. We tend to forget that we are part of the natural scheme of things. We tend to forget that we are part of the natural scheme of things. And the Buddha said, as related to the chant last night, the ending chant, it's the nature of all things to arise and pass away. Happy are those who can live with this wisdom. Happy are those who can live with the wisdom. So, as we explore outward into the cosmos, we can't find anything solid or stationary. And then we explore inward into the subatomic world. Again, we can't find anything stationary or solitary. So there's an awful lot of change going on. And as Pema says, if you regard change as pain, there's going to be a whole lot of pain going on. You struggle. And when you struggle, then dukkha is known. Unsatisfactoriness. Often translated as suffering. I personally like stress as a translation for dukkha. Ajahn Mahaboa, who was a Thai forest master, meditation teacher, explained dukkha as what ever puts a squeeze on the heart. We all know what that's like. Squeeze on the heart. You know. And the Buddha, he summarized his teaching, oftentimes he would summarize his teaching as look, I teach about one thing. I teach about the nature of suffering and the end of suffering. He thought that the understanding of dukkha was so important, he made it the first of his Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. There's also a path out of it. But let's just start, let's get real. That was his take on things. And he saw it manifested in everybody's life, including his own. He saw that inherent instability of life, of all nature. And that when you cling to anything, life becomes a struggle. It becomes difficult, stressful, unsatisfactory. So the Buddha, when he speaks of clinging, it's kind of in the larger sense. Okay? On one hand, we find things we like and we're just trying to keep them like they are, and so we hold on tight. And on the other hand, when we encounter things we don't like, we thrash around and try to get rid of them. And this grasping or pushing, it has a common characteristic of what we might call stickiness. You know, there's not flow or relaxation in the mind. The heart tends to constrict when we're grasping or pushing away, thrashing to get rid of things we don't like. Somebody once said that suffering is like rope burn. You know, we're holding on, trying to hold on to creation in some way, and it's not going to stand still. You know? Now, of course, there's plenty of happiness and pleasure in life. But since things are in constant flux, whatever happiness arises is going to dissolve. But to our benefit, whatever challenges and suffering arise, they're going to change also. There's two sides to that coin, you know. So basing your happiness on external conditions, it's an iffy proposition at best. Now, if you can go out and create everything in your environment, in your world, and in all your relationships, where all the conditions of your life are favorable, and if you can find a way to keep them that way, well, then you'd be the very first one to be able to do that. You know? And so when you finally see the truth of dukkha, and the futility of trying to arrange things for relief, you eventually come to the fact that the real way out of suffering is in. And the first step is just acknowledging that it exists. The natural unsatisfactoriness of old age, sickness, death, loss, you know, all the change. This intermittent squeezing of the heart that we all feel. You know. So we talked a little bit about anicca, impermanence, a little bit about dukkha, this suffering, these two characteristics. And if you can swallow the pill that everything is impermanent, and I can remember being on a retreat where part of the instructions were, okay, during walking meditation, go out and come up with something that's permanent. Just reflect on it. The mountains, well, maybe not so much. Well, you know, so it was kind of a challenge that the teacher gave us. So I offer that to you. But so if you can swallow the pill that everything is impermanent, and that a good part of your suffering is fighting against this impermanence in one form or another, fighting against Mother Nature. Well, where does that leave you? You know? And I mean you. Where does that leave you? The you that you might feel inside you. Are you a self or selfless? Are you impermanent? What's permanent in you? So we'll look now at the third characteristic of existence that the Buddha articulated, this selfless nature of creation. We'll just look at that for a few minutes. Now, this is the most enigmatic concept of all of Eastern philosophy, this business about the selfless nature of creation. So, I want you to kind of take this on with some curiosity and some lightness. Come see, come saw. What is this? Don't fret over it. Just kind of explore it lightly with interest. Every morning, when I drag myself out of bed, so far I've still been able to get up, and I pass by the mirror, if I have the courage to look into it, less and less I have that courage, there's something staring back at me, okay? It isn't what I saw 40 years ago, I know that. Things have changed, I get that part. But there's somebody there, In the conventional self, there I am. I'm here, I'm separate. I'm a unique blend of physical and psychological characteristics. Nobody's exactly like me, We're all one of a kind, like little snowflakes, Originals. A unique expression of creation, all of us. That's really beautiful, fascinating. But at the same time as we say yes to our conventional existence, we are deeply interconnected. I like the Huayan school of Buddhism where they talk about Indra's net, where there's this net and there's a jewel at each intersection, and each jewel reflects all the other jewels in the net. And that's the metaphor for creation. And so we meet here and we're in each other's presence. We're not speaking, but you're part of my experience. I can feel you in my relational field. You can feel me, and we can feel each other in various changing forms. But it's convenient to refer to myself as an I or me, in a separate sense. But that really does belie the truth of what's going on. Will Bryson has a kind of, in his book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, has a little funny section, and he says, all things are made of atoms. They are everywhere and they constitute everything. And they are in numbers you really can't conceive. At sea level, at a temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 cubic centimeter of air, a space the size of a sugar cube, will contain 45 billion molecules. I don't even know what that number is. A molecule contains a minimum of 2 atoms, and they are in every single cubic centimeter you see around you. Atoms, in short, are very abundant. They're also fantastically durable. Because they are so long-lived, atoms really get around. Every atom you possess has almost certainly passed through several stars and been part of millions of organisms on its way to becoming you. We are each so atomically numerous and so vigorously recycled in death that a significant number of our atoms, and up to 1 billion for each of us, it has been suggested, probably once belonged to Shakespeare. 1 billion each may come from Genghis Khan, Beethoven, and the Buddha, and any other historical figure you can name. The personage has to be historical, as it takes atoms some decades to become thoroughly redistributed. So we are all literal reincarnations. So if we take the conventional view of self, that we are something static and permanent. If we take this as the final word, we're really diverging from what the Buddha discovered and what science has discovered. And with a view like that of a static, separate self, we're kind of guaranteeing increasing suffering. What we seem to do is unconsciously assign certain characteristics to the self. Characteristics to the self that aren't really there. And that kind of moves us into some trouble. And one way we can, lots of philosophers and people have taken a shot at this, and one way that some philosophers look at this, okay, well, if we can't quite define the self, can we define what it isn't? All right? What are the hidden beliefs that we carry? One characteristics that we seem to assign to this self is continuity. That the me or the I or the self is pretty much the same moving through time. You know, that you might feel that the person listening to this talk is the same person who went to that grammar school a long time ago, learned to ride a bike when you were 5 and got the measles when you were 7. Okay? Now, through the strength of that particular belief of continuity, of the same continuous self, depending on the strength of that, that's going to affect our resistance to or acceptance of all the usual changes in life: old age, sickness, death, separation, loss. Depending of the strength of our unconscious belief of the continuity of self, change will be more or less difficult for us. And this is all flying below the radar, but if that unconscious belief is really strong of a separate self, any kind of change is going to knock us off our pins. If that sense of self becomes a little loose or looser, then we're going to roll with the punches a little better, so to speak. Okay. Remember, just take this easy on this part about selflessness. Just consider the possibilities. Be entertained by the concept. Another unconscious belief. We also unconsciously come to believe that there's an observer, okay? Someone who sits apart from the changing body sensations, emotions, etc., thoughts. Now the Greeks were trying to figure this out too. And they posited for a while that there was a homunculus, a little person who lived inside and pulled all the strings and made things happen, like a wizard behind the curtain. They were smart people trying to figure this out. And even when we practice a lot, we still kind of feel, well, there's something's in here, kind of making this all happen. It's a persistent feeling. But after looking and investigating and exploring, we really find that this felt observer, we can't determine a location or a form for it. It's kind of, it's something, but it's, where is it? Oh, I don't know. Well, what's its form? Well, I don't know. So can this observing self be me if I can't find it? It's just an inquiry. It's the big question. Just check it out. Not going to get any answers about this one so much. Another unconscious belief is that we have control over this organism, or at least some measure of control over the me. If I really had control over this body, heart, mind thing, boy, I'd make a few changes, a few alterations. I might be a little smarter, I might be a little healthier. This long list of doctors that kind of keep all this going, I wouldn't need them. I wouldn't have that list. They wouldn't be in my call list at all. I might be more compassionate, have more equanimity. But I don't have control. Our body, our thoughts, our emotions. And of course you might make the argument that, hey, we make choices in our life. And because we do, there's got to be something that's making these choices. Somebody. It's another point of inquiry. Check that out. So when the Buddha spoke of not self, his point was that these unconscious assumptions that we hold are not true in any entity that we can find. Doesn't seem to be any continuous abiding entity. There's no center of experience. No wizard behind the curtain. And I don't have ultimate control over this thing. I can't even find any central core. So if we can't find an abiding permanent self, and believing in one exacerbates our suffering, how do we break the cycle? That's where the Buddha's prescription comes in. That's where our practice comes in. He asks us all to sit down and just mindfully experience all the comings and goings. Not pushing and pulling on them. The changes in the body, the mind, the heart, the emotions, etc., the perceptions. Noticing the feeling tone that comes with every experience. Every experience we either find it pleasant or unpleasant. Some we find neutral. And it's different for everybody, So when he asks you to sit and mindfully watch all this phenomenon of change, if you do it long enough and carefully enough, experiencing the changing flow of everything, eventually you start to loosen your grip on this seemingly solid, separate self. And that's a big relief. You begin to relax into and feel this life more as a beautiful, miraculous flow. More like a river than a solid object that's in opposition to a whole bunch of other solid objects. So that relaxing into the flow, when we have those moments, when we're experiencing it, is very different than a life that's dominated by resisting what is. This is when suffering significantly starts to diminish. The struggle starts to let up a little bit. And the whole practice, when you examine the Buddha's practice, it's designed to poke holes in this sense of a solid, separate self. And that reduces our resistance just the way nature is. Every contemplation in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the sutta that basically outlines our mindfulness practice, every single one, contemplation about the body, about feelings, the mind, about the aggregates, the hindrances, all these contemplations, these meditations. The underlying thread is, hey, pay attention to it changing. Know when it's arising. Know when it's doing its thing. Know when it's dissolving. So we're watching change internally and externally. Analayo, who is a German monk, fabulous Buddhist scholar and a heavy-duty practitioner, I mean, he meditates 3 hours every morning before he gets going. He wrote a book on the Satipatthana Sutta called Satipatthana, the Direct Path to Realization, I think. And in the end of the book, he sums it all up. What's in that, maybe the most important sutta or discourse of the Buddha. And he summed it up in just a few words. Keep calmly knowing change. Keep calmly knowing change. That's the Buddha's teaching. And really, it's encouraging us to kind of get more with nature, the way it is. Not the way we want it to be, but just the way it is. So the Buddha said all compounded things are subject to dissolution. And we are made up of systems. There are millions of living creatures within us. You are not self-existing. You are the result of everything. You have arisen due to causes and conditions of which are mysterious from the dawn of creation. You can't control it. It's not yours. It's shaped by nature. You are nature. Anatta, selflessness, really brings that point home. We're not separate. We're not apart from this creation. All those atoms vibrating and dancing, but you're like the wave in the ocean. Seemingly at times you're feeling really separate and isolated, but you're part of the vast ocean. So today, in a short period of time, we kind of tried to encapsulate the Buddha's 3 portals to freedom, the 3 characteristics. And when we explore impermanence, it shows us the truth of nature. And it points also to appreciating the preciousness of this creation, to savor this moving world and all the encounters we have with our fellow beings. Because through this truth of impermanence, we know that nothing remains the same. And because of that, nothing or anyone should be taken for granted. The next encounter with a loved one may be the last. This may be our last day. And so when we explore unsatisfactoriness or stress, dukkha, by mindfully watching over and over again how you make yourself suffer, by grasping really hard onto something you want, you like, or by pushing away frantically something that you don't like. When we watch that enough, ultimately, we start to not grip so hard. We're not grasping so much, Let go more. We start to let go more into the flow, to relax into the beauty of this creation and just not fight it so much. And actually learning more and more to enjoy the ride, surf the wave. And lastly, that 3rd characteristic, the selfless nature of phenomena, arising and passing away. As enigmatic as that is, teaches you to not take yourself so seriously. To maybe even come to enjoy this kind of magical cascade of sensations, thoughts, and emotions without feeling so desperate about it, without feeling so much ownership. Me, mine. Got to defend and protect. It's phenomena rolling on. And we can learn to defend less, to promote ourselves less. Because we're changing moment by moment, whatever that is. A self, a me, that is not continuous, permanent, or having a core. When that begins to happen or loosen, the burden does get lighter. And with a lighter burden, you get to really kick back a little more and enjoy this wonder, this miracle that is this life that we have. So I'll finish with one of my favorite poems, and most of you have heard it. It's Coffey's, and it's called Deepening the Wonder. Death is a favor to us, but our scales have lost their balance. The impermanence of the body should give us great clarity, deepening the wonder in our senses and eyes of this mysterious existence we share and are surely just traveling through. If I were in a tavern tonight, Hafiz would call for drinks, and as the master poured, I would be reminded that all I know of life and myself is that we are just a mid-air flight of golden wine between his pitcher and his cup. If I were in the tavern tonight, I would buy freely for everyone in this world, because our marriage with the cruel beauty of time and space cannot endure very long. Death is a favor to us, but our minds have lost their balance. The miraculous existence and impermanence of form always makes the illumined ones laugh and sing.